Buy Sri Lanka's best internet package for online learning and online working with many amazing offers. Call 1212 for more information. Sri Lanka Telecom.
ලෙන්ගතුකම වැඩි කරගන්න ලව්ජු රුපියල් 50ට අඩු කළා.
මාමේ එන්න අපිට එකක් බොමු.
In your headlines tonight, strict measures. Minuwangoda cluster numbers rise past 1,700 across the country as Gazette laying down health and safety laws set to be issued tonight. Allegations and denials. Former President Maithripala Sirisena denies urging former IGP to take the Easter attack blame in return for a diplomatic posting. Safe destination. Sri Lanka voted second best wish list destination to travel to by Condé Nast Travelers readers. Shaky foundations. CBSL issues public warning of risks in depositing with licensed finance companies non-compliant with capital adequacy requirements. All this and much more coming up on this Thursday, the 15th of October 2020.
Nava sunlight sakura. Then Dikukal Pavatina Sakura Mal Suandin.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Shanella Fernando in your top stories for tonight. In the latest COVID-19 news, another 49 coronavirus infections were identified today, increasing cases resulting from the Minuwangoda cluster to 1,770. Meanwhile, the Government Medical Officers Association cautions that Sri Lanka is facing a massive threat of community transmission and warned that the growing numbers of infections will soon result in the overcrowding of hospitals. The Minuwangoda COVID-19 cluster has been steadily growing since the 4th of October and now also includes 150 coronavirus patients from the Katunayaka Free Trade Zone as well. Due to the prevailing situation, a quarantine curfew was imposed in the Katunayaka police area with effect from 5 a.m. today. Police media spokesperson DIG Ajit Rohana stated that employees of companies in the zone can use their service identity cards as a curfew pass after confirmation of their employee status.
දැන් මේ ඇදිරි නීතිය ප්‍රකාශයට පත් කරන්නේ කොවිඩ් ආසාදිතයින් හමුවීම ව්‍යාප්තිය කියන කාරණා සලකලා බලලා සෞඛ්‍ය සේවා අධ්‍යක්ෂ ජනරාල්වරයාගේ නිර්දේශය මතයි. දැන් අපි ගත්තොත් මේ ප්‍රදේශ සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම ඇරලා දාලා තිබුණොත් මොකද වෙන්නේ? ඔය කර්මාන්තශාලාවල වැඩ කරන අය කඩවල් වලට යන්න පුළුවන්, පාරට එන්න පුළුවන්, ප්‍රවාහන සේවා භාවිතා කරන්න පුළුවන්. එතකොට ඔය ප්‍රදේශයේ ඉන්න හැම කෙනෙකුටම මේ රෝගය ව්‍යාප්ත වීමේ අවදානමක් තියෙනවා. ඉතින් කර්මාන්තශාලා ඇතුලේ ඒ සේවකයෝ නිසි උපක්‍රම අරගෙන කර්මාන්තශාලාවල වැඩ කරනවා. ඒ වගේම මේ ප්‍රදේශීය ජනතාවට මේක සම්ප්‍රේෂණය වීම පිළිබඳ ප්‍රශ්නයක් ඇති වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒ අනුව මේ ඇඳිරි නීතිය මේ ප්‍රදේශයට පනවලා තියෙනවා. ලංකාවේ දැනට පොලිස් බල ප්‍රදේශ 19ක් සඳහා ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙනවා කටුනායකත් එක්ක.
Meanwhile, a 33-year-old hotel employee residing in Senapura Tissamaharama has also contracted COVID-19. According to the Debaravava Public Health Inspector, he was admitted to the Debaravava Base Hospital on the 13th owing to health complications. There, he had undergone a PCR test and was sent back home in an ambulance. Afterwards, steps were taken to place the individual and his family members in self-quarantine, during which time he had visited the Hambantota General Hospital in a three-wheeler for treatment. Prior to visiting the hospital, the hotel employee had been treated at 3 private treatment centers, leading to all doctors and dozens more exposed individuals at locations he visited being directed to quarantine and subsequent PCR tests. Meanwhile, a lunch packet seller in the area of Handala Vattala has also contracted the coronavirus. Health officials in the area say that the individual's wife is an employee of a garment factory in Minuwangoda and was also diagnosed with COVID-19. He had been selling rice packets at the location until Saturday, the 3rd of this month. Meanwhile, a fish trader in the area of Kuttivilla Kirindivela has also contracted the virus, which led to nearly 80 associates being directed to quarantine. Residents say that the infected fish trader has travelled to the areas of Kuttigala, Randavana, Maddegama, Bogahakumbura, Kirindivela and Papilvela to sell his fish. Meanwhile, a senior assistant manager of the Public Aid Department of the Colombo Municipal Council has also been infected with COVID-19. The patient's husband is an elevator operator at the Colombo National Hospital and they were identified as residents of Kaduwela. Meanwhile, steps were taken to quarantine 2 teachers and 28 students of an Arabic school in Maligavatta at the school premises for conducting classes in violation of quarantine laws. Police said that the school principal was arrested for violating quarantine regulations and later released on bail. COVID-19 results of 7 people meanwhile returned positive after a group of 215 people were subjected to PCR tests at the Jayala Public Stadium recently. Among them are 3 members of the Lanka Electricity Company in Kandana. Elsewhere in Moratuwa, a random PCR test conducted on area residents found 1 COVID-19 patient among them. According to the Public Health Inspector for Eguda Uyana Moratuwa, she had recently attended a wedding in Diulapitiya. Accordingly, 150 of her close associates were subjected to PCR tests. In the meantime, on the instructions of the area PHI, a resident of Raja Samaranayaka Mawata in Panadura, who was placed in quarantine, had travelled for a PCR test on a motorcycle. His departure from his residence has resulted in unrest among other residents in the area. Elsewhere, a bank employee at the 19th floor of the Hatta National Bank Towers in Colombo 10 has been diagnosed with COVID-19. The bank announced that colleagues of the infected individual were immediately placed in self-quarantine and will undergo PCR tests. With fresh cases of COVID-19 detected, vehicular movement were restricted in the areas of Ganihimulla, Peralandavatta and Helakandana in the Minuwangoda police area. Meanwhile, the Government Medical Officers Association also held a media briefing today regarding the current COVID-19 situation.
අපි වෙන කවරදාටත් වඩා යම් අවදානම් තැනක ඉන්නවා කියන එක සම්බන්ධයෙන් ආයේ කතා දෙකක් නැහැ, එක දෙකිඩියාවක් නැහැ. දරුණුකම තමයි මේ රැල්ලේ එහෙම නැත්නම් මේ පොකුරේ දවස ගන්න ලෙඩ්ඩු 100 200 අපිට එකතු වෙනවා රෝහල් පද. නමුත් ටිකට් කපලා ගෙදර යන්නේ ලෙඩ්ඩු 15ක් 20ක් වගේ ප්‍රමාණයක්. ඒ හරහා මොකද්ද වෙන්නේ? දවස ගන්න රෝහල් පද්ධතියේ තදබදය එහෙම නැත්නම් ධාරිතාව දවස ගන්න අපිට අරුබුදයකට යනවා. වාසනාවට තාම අපි රෝගී සංකූලත ඇති වෙලා දැඩි සත්කාරයක වලට දාන්න සිද්ධ වුන්නේ නැහැ. ඒ නිසා ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන් අපි වාසනාවන්තයි. අපිට මේ වෙනකොට කියන්න පුළුවන් එක දෙයක් තියෙනවා. ඒ තමයි වෙන කවදාටත් වඩා සමාජ ව්‍යාප්තියක් කරා යන්න තියෙන අවදානම වැඩි වෙලා තියෙන්නේ මේ මොහොතේ. සමාජ ව්‍යාප්තියක් දක්වා කියලා කියන කරුණු නැති වුණාට රෝගී අනුපොකුරු පිහිවීමේ අවදානමක් මේ මොහොතේ මතුවලා තියෙනවා ප්‍රධාන පොකුරින් බාහිරව. රටම ලොක්ඩවුන් එකකට යන එක නවත්තගෙන ප්‍රදේශ විදියට ලොක්ඩවුන් කරලා මේ ප්‍රශ්නේ විසඳ ගන්නවාද කියලා තීරණය කරන්නේ වසංගත රෝග විද්‍යාංශ මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් තාක්ෂණිකව මේ මොහොතේ කරන හරි මැදිහත් වීමත් එක්ක.
Upon tracing the travel history of the new cases, it has been revealed that infected persons has travelled in 6 buses plying routes in several parts of the island. These include 3 buses travelling on the Southern Expressway, namely bus number NF2772 plying from Makumbra to Gaul, bus number NG0549 plying from Ambalangoda to Kadavata, bus number NF7515 plying from Kadavata to Gaul. The other buses are ND4890 from Colombo to Madagama, ND6503 from Colombo to Jaffna and ND9788 from Alpitia to Colombo. The Ministry of Transport has requested the public to immediately inform health officials if they have travelled in any of these buses. What's more, on instructions of the Ministry of Health, the National Film Corporation of Sri Lanka today decided to close all cinema halls until the 31st of this month. With the identification of 49 new cases from the Minuwangoda COVID-19 cluster this afternoon, the total number of infected persons emerging from the cluster increased to 1,770. 13 of the reported cases today are staff members of the apparel factory and their associates who are currently in quarantine facilities. According to the Department of Government Information, the remaining 36 were other associates of the employees. Health authorities place the total number of infected people in the country at present at 5,219. Only 1,826 among them are active cases.
Safeguard hand sanitizer. Navatama nishpadana pela neerogimat diviyakata.
A Gazette notification listing out the new COVID-19 health and safety laws has been signed by the Minister of Health Pavitra Vanyarachi and is set to be issued tonight. The Gazette will allow a magistrate to penalise those violating health and safety regulations with a maximum fine of 10,000 rupees or 6 months in prison or with a combination of both.
A Gazette notification detailing the new COVID-19 preventive regulations has been signed by the Minister of Health, Pavitra Wanniarachchi, and will be issued later tonight. The Gazette will pave the way for legal action to be taken against anyone violating the health and safety regulations issued by the government to control the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of the provisions included in the Gazette will require mandatory face masks for all persons entering business or service establishments and will also require the maintenance of a social distance of at least 1 meter. Further, the temperature checks of all those who enter the premises must be measured and adequate hand sanitization facilities must be provided. Further, the temperature checks of all those who enter the premises must be measured and adequate hand sanitization facilities must also be provided. Organizations will also be required to maintain a register containing contact details and NIC numbers of all those who enter the premises. It will also detail requirements to limit the number of employees or visitors within premises at any given time to under the maximum limit. Measures have also been taken to further strengthen laws relating to special matters such as travel restrictions, quarantine and transportation through the Gazette. According to the Gazette, anyone who is found violating the health and safety provisions can be penalized with a maximum fine of Rs 10,000 or 6 months imprisonment or both.
සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යාංශ විසින් ලබා දුන් සමහර මාර්ගෝපදේශ නීති බවට පත් කිරීමට රජය තීරණය කරනු ලැබුවා. එහිදී විශේෂයෙන්ම එම නීති කඩ කරන පුද්ගලයින්ට රුපියල් 10,000කට නොවැඩි දඩයකුත් මාස 6කට සිරදඬුවමකුත් යන කාරණා දෙකම හෝ එක් දඬුවමක් ලබා දීමට අධිකරණයට හැකියාව ලැබෙනවා. සංචරණය සීමා කිරීම, නිරෝධායනය, ඒ වගේම ප්‍රවාහනය වැනි කාරණා සම්බන්ධයෙන් මෙතෙක් පැවති නීති තව දුරටත් ශක්තිමත් කිරීමත් මෙම ගැසට් පත්‍රය මගින් සිදුවනවා.
Despite being presented with telephone records of regular phone contact between former State Intelligence Service Director Nilantha Jayawardena and himself in the run-up to the Easter attacks, former President Maithripala Sirisena insisted that he was not told of the warnings until after the bombings. The former head of state also denied allegations that he ordered former IGP Pujit Jayasundara to take the blame for the security failures in return for an ambassadorial posting.
Former President Maithripala Sirisena appeared before the Presidential Commission investigating the Easter Sunday attacks for his 4th day of testimony. At the outset, the chairman of the Presidential Commission asked the former president, were 2 out of the 4 suspects arrested under the Prevention of Terrorism Act following the detection of the Vananthaviluva explosives cache released just before the Easter attacks last year. In response, ex-President Sirisena stated, if they were released, then the person who released them must be held responsible for it. To this, the chairman of the commission showed the witness a document and stated, according to documents submitted to the commission, it was you who signed off on their conditional release. After a long pause, the former head of state responded, I signed them because the Criminal Investigation Department and the Defence Ministry send over many documents for me to sign. As President, how many documents do I sign every day? The Additional Solicitor General at the Commission then asked him if he ever banned former IGP Pujit Jayasundara from attending National Security Council meetings. The witness replied, I barred him from attending the meeting at times due to disciplinary issues. The Additional Solicitor General then asked him, in his testimony, the former IGP told the Commission that following former IP Nishantha Silva's removal on your orders, you had called him back and asked him on whose instructions he had done so and ordered his reinstatement to the CID. Is that true? The former president responded, I do not remember if I made such a call, but I came under a lot of pressure from many quarters. This was backed by NGOs affiliated to the LTT network that was defeated by the armed forces. Even at cabinet meetings, I faced severe opposition from government ministers. I told them to do whatever they wanted. The Additional Solicitor General then pointedly asked the ex-president, did you summon former IGP Pujit Jayasundara to your residence on 21st April 2019 and tell him to accept responsibility for the attacks? When the former president responded, quote, I did not order him to do so, unquote, the Additional Solicitor General then asked him, did you also offer him an ambassadorial posting if he did so? The ex-president then responded, I offered him such a posting long before that in 2018, after he danced in the Asala procession. I told him at the time that he does not act befitting his position, and told him I would give him a diplomatic post to go abroad. I said I would appoint a new IGP. This is an old incident that he is trying to use now. I am not someone of low intelligence to offer someone a diplomatic posting when so many bombs have gone off in the country. The Additional Solicitor General then stated, "We have information that shows that SIS Director Nilantha Jayawardena had spoken to you by phone on several occasions right up to 16th April after receiving the foreign intelligence warning on 4th April. Did he during any of those instances inform you of the foreign intelligence warning?" The former president replied, "No. Clearly, no." He was then asked by the Additional Solicitor General, "Did the Director State Intelligence Service call you on 21st April after the bomb attacks?" The witness replied, "Yes, I had just returned from the hospital to my hotel when Nilantha Jayawardena called me. He informed me of the bomb attacks. He told me that many lives had been lost. He told me that despite having informed the Defense Secretary and the IGP, they had failed to take necessary security measures." Following this, the retired Court of Appeal judge at the Commission asked the ex-president whether he had travelled to Singapore for medical treatment, to which he replied in the affirmative. The witness was then asked, "Doesn't the Constitution give you powers to appoint an acting Defense Secretary when you travel abroad for medical treatment?" The former president responded, "Some presidents have done that, some have not. Besides, my medical condition wasn't that serious." The retired appeals court judge then asked him, "Why did you go to a Singapore hospital if it was not a serious illness?" "I only ask because you, as a former Minister of Health, must have improved our health services to some extent." To this, the witness stated, "I had been receiving treatment from that hospital for quite some time." Meanwhile, turning the Commission's attention to telephone records submitted as evidence, the Additional Solicitor General told the former head of state, "You claim that State Intelligence Director Nilantha Jayawardena only informed you after the attacks on 21st April. But records show that he had contacted your Chief Security Officer through your Paget Road residence at 8:02 am on that day. As per these records, the conversation lasted 1.5 minutes. With the first bomb set to go off at 8:45 am, this means when this call happened, no bombs had gone off as yet." After a momentary silence, former President Sirisena replied, "No, I only received information after the bombings happened."
More news on the other side of this break. Stay tuned.
Ceylon Bank, the bank with a heart.
Welcome back. In more news, the lawyers for former Minister of Commerce and Industry Rishad Badiuddin filed a writ application in the Court of Appeal today, seeking a court order to prevent his imminent arrest. The former minister has been evading moves by 6 CID teams deployed to arrest him and 2 others to face charges of misappropriation of more than 9.5 million rupees to transport IDPs to polling centres in 2019.
The Attorney General instructed the Acting Inspector General of Police on the 13th to arrest former Minister of Industry and Commerce Rishad Badiuddin and 2 others for offences committed under the Presidential Elections Act and the Public Property Act. The former minister has been accused of misappropriating over 9.5 million rupees in funds from an IDP project run by the Ministry of Industry and Commerce during the 2019 presidential election to pay for 222 SLTB buses to transport internally displaced persons from Puttalam to Mana to cast their votes. However, despite instructions issued by the Attorney General to the acting IGP to immediately arrest the 3 suspects, including Badiuddin, the parliamentarian is yet to be found and arrested. Only the IDP project's accountant, one of the 3 that includes the project director, Mohammad Yazim, has been arrested so far. A team of CID officers visited the former minister's residence at Bauda Lokamavata in Colombo 7 today as well, but left after waiting in vain for around an hour. Meanwhile, the lawyers of the former Minister of Industry and Commerce filed a writ petition in the Court of Appeal today, seeking an injunction preventing his imminent arrest. The Acting Inspector General of Police, C.D. Vikramaratne, Deputy Inspector General in charge of the Criminal Investigation Department, S.P. Ranasinghe, and 7 other investigating officers have been named as respondents. The petition submitted by Badiuddin says that he had obtained approvals from the then Minister of Finance, Mangala Samaravira, for the transportation facilities that were offered at the time.
Sri Lanka has once again earned a top spot as one of the best places to visit by travellers, the Simon Condé Nast Travellers 2020 Readers' Choice Awards. The magazine's readers ranked Sri Lanka the 2nd best country in the world to visit this year. Sri Lanka was second to Italy but outclassed countries such as Portugal, Japan and Greece, which made it to the top 5. Condé Nast Traveller readers ranked the best countries and islands in the world in the 2020 Reader's Choice Awards survey, from far-flung stunners in Southeast Asia to volcanic outcrops in the Mediterranean. Condé Nast named Sri Lanka the second best destination that stayed most in travellers' minds when travel may have been out of reach. Sri Lanka scored 93.96 points, slightly behind first-placed Italy with a score of 94.05. Sri Lanka eclipsed countries such as Portugal, Japan and Greece, listed in the top 5. Sri Lanka was also voted one of the best islands of the world, adding that Sri Lanka offered myriad charms to those willing to explore. Sri Lanka was recognized among the best of the best for its countless sacred sites, boundless crystal blue waters and picturesque jade green tea estates. In the meantime, Sri Lanka's national carrier Sri Lankan Airlines too was recognized as one of the world's leading airlines. Sri Lankan Airlines was awarded 6th place in the survey among best international airlines, with readers commending the airline's comfy business class seats, attentive cabin crew and flavorful in-flight meals. The factors considered in selecting winners under this category have been the health and safety measures taken up by airlines to adopt to the new normal of travel and the marketing initiatives carried out by the airlines to gain top-of-mind awareness in the present scenario. Minister of Water Supply Vasudevana Nayakkara and Charge d'Affaires of the Chinese Embassy in Sri Lanka, Hu Wei, have signed an agreement on cooperation in water research and technology yesterday. The agreement, which is a follow-up to an earlier agreement signed in 2015, or cooperation in efforts to tackle the chronic kidney diseases issue in many areas of the country.
The government of Sri Lanka and China signed a supplementary agreement yesterday on a memorandum of understanding on water research and technology cooperation aimed at providing clean drinking water to several areas in the island. Charge d'Affaires of the Chinese Embassy in Sri Lanka, Hu Wei, and Minister of Water Supply Vasudevana Nayakkara signed the agreement. Chinese state news agency Xinhua reported that the signing of the supplementary agreement was a follow-up of the important consensus reached recently by the two countries. The report added the original MOU between Sri Lanka and China was inked in March 2015 to tackle the chronic kidney disease of unknown etiology, or CKDU, and provide clean drinking water to CKDU prevalent areas in Sri Lanka. Under the MOU, a state-of-the-art joint research and demonstration center for water technology was established recently at the University of Peradeniya, which will be funded by the Chinese Academy of Sciences for the next 5 years. Furthermore, 3 groundwater purification demonstration projects and more than 20 rainwater harvesting devices have been installed in CKDU-affected areas to provide high-quality drinking water to more than 4,000 villages and 1,300 primary school students. It added that during the past 5 years, 66 water and medical professionals took part in training programs by the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and currently 53 Sri Lankan graduate students, including 19 PhD students, are studying at the University of the Chinese Academy of Sciences.
We'll return after this short commercial break. Don't go away. Welcome back in your business news. The central bank has issued notice of a list of licensed finance companies that have failed to meet minimum capital adequacy requirements. The notice warned depositors that such non-compliance poses significant risks to deposits and advised the public to exercise due care when depositing with LFCS and also to refrain from depositing funds in unauthorized institutions or individuals.
The Central Bank of Sri Lanka remains solely in charge of regulating and supervising licensed finance companies under provisions of the Finance Business Act and issues directions to promote the safety and soundness of the overall financial sector. In this backdrop, the Central Bank published a special public notice yesterday stating that regulation and supervision does not necessarily prevent the failure of any financial institution, including licensed finance companies. The CBSS stated that 8 licensed finance companies, namely Apico Finance Company plc, Associated Motor Finance Company plc, Bimput Finance plc, Canrich Finance Limited, Merchant Bank of Sri Lanka and Finance PLC, Richard Peris Finance Limited, Softlogic Finance PLC and UB Finance Company Limited have been found non-compliant with the minimum capital adequacy requirement and have been given extensions for rectification. Moreover, the central bank stated that Nation Lanka Finance PLC has also been found to be non-compliant with the minimum capital adequacy requirement, and the licensed finance company is yet to submit a feasible capital augmentation plan. The central bank further noted that licensed finance companies that are non-compliant with the minimum capital adequacy requirement have been indicated in the notice as they pose a significant risk to depositors. The bank says that it advises the public to exercise due care when making deposits in LFCs to ensure the safety of their funds, and also to refrain from depositing funds in unauthorized institutions or with individuals.
The G20 group has reached a consensus on a framework for debt relief for the world's poorest countries, with the Saudi finance minister calling it a historical achievement. Mohammed Al-Jadaan, the Saudi finance chief, however, expressed regret over the lack of private sector participation in debt relief programs as G20 officials agreed to extend a freeze in official bilateral debt payments by 6 months.
G20 finance ministers and central bank governors yesterday agreed in principle on a common framework to deal on a case-by-case basis with the rising number of low-income countries facing debt distress. The officials would finalize the new framework at an extraordinary meeting before G20 leaders meet next month. In a news conference following the G20 meeting, Saudi Arabia's finance minister Mohammed Al-Jadaan said that reaching the common framework is a historic achievement in the international debt agenda.
Today, we agreed in principle on a common framework for debt treatment beyond the SSI. While the DSSI deals with the liquidity issues, the common framework deals with solvency issues, with the aim of addressing debt vulnerabilities on a case-by-case approach. The common framework is a historic achievement and a major breakthrough in the international debt agenda. It facilitates timely and orderly debt treatment for DSSI eligible countries. We did not.
He added that the group of the world's leading 20 economies did not leave any stone unturned in engaging private investors to participate in a debt relief initiative for the world's poorest countries. G20 officials agreed to extend a freeze in official bilateral debt payments by 6 months and expressed disappointment about the absence of private sector creditors in the moratorium.
Leave any stone unturned. We looked at this, we called upon the private investors to participate, we engaged with them to ensure that we have a coordination on putting forward a framework for voluntary participation by the private investors.
Sri Lankan shares closed higher today, their 6th session of gains in the last 7 trading days, boosted by industrial and material stocks. The benchmark all-share price index ended up 0.51% at 5,920, while the S&P/SL 20 index of most liquid stocks gained 0.82% or 19.31 points to close at 2,366.14. Let's now take a look at a brief report on how the market traded today.
The market sustained its positive run for the second consecutive day with high level of retail participation. So as usual, we've seen in the last few weeks and the few months as well, where the retail participation is high in the market. We see that even today it is continuing. There is a huge interest in the mid-cap counters, especially the usual retail favorites have been on the top of the turnover list, with Expo leading the way. With the government announcing that there will be some domestic preference for some of the government contracts, we saw a significant interest in construction and building material counters like Tokyo Cement, Alumex, Royal Ceramics and so on. That kind of a buying interest is coming because of the government's announcement of its interest to go through an infrastructure drive, and with that only those counters have drawn significant interest. In addition to that, we saw some interest generated in the blue chip counters as well.
The Sri Lankan rupee closed firmer at 184 rupees and 45 to 60 cents to the US dollar today, while bond yields eased marginally in the overall market. The rupee closed at 184 rupees and 75 to 90 cents against the greenback yesterday. Here's a look at how the rupee fared against other international currencies. With that, we wrap up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining. I'm Shanella Fernando. Have a good night.